At the beginning of the 19th century, New Orleans was a cultural mosaic, a curious mixture of people, French and Spanish, English and German, Creole and West Indian. Where the Mississippi meets the Gulf of Mexico, people of vision saw opportunities for trade, while others came to the city seeking work. There were merchants and growers, servants and farmhands, adventurers and sailors, slaves and freemen. Jewish immigrants who settled in many other parts of the United States became part of the earliest settlers of New Orleans also. They came from the eastern seaboard of the United States, from the Caribbean and South America. Others arrived from South, Central, and Western Europe. They were frequently young Jewish men, characterized as single or unmarried. Of those who did wed, most seemed to marry women out of the Jewish faith, so Jewish offspring were infrequent. Furthermore, most of the early bachelors fled not only religious or economic persecution, but by all accounts had little interest in establishing a Jewish institution or lifestyle in New Orleans. So much for tradition. It was not until 1827, after a substantial number of Jewish families chose to make New Orleans their home, that a congregation was established in New Orleans. JCRS Chesed, now known as Toro Synagogue, and named after the most famous early Jewish settler in New Orleans, Judah Toro. Currently, Toro Synagogue is located near the corner of St. Charles and Napoleon Avenues. It recently celebrated its 175th birthday. Beginning, perhaps, with the establishment of Congregation JCRS Chesed, the New Orleans Jewish community began to quickly grow. New Orleans in the 1830s was now one of the largest cities in the United States. Additional congregations were soon established along with the cemetery. The Jewish merchants and businessmen grew in numbers, which increased their ability to support civic and religious institutions. Along with the need to create and sustain cemeteries for Jewish burials came the need to care for the sick of the city. By the 1840s, the Hebrew Benevolent Society and the Ladies' Hebrew Benevolent Society had been created to serve the ill and indigent. In 1852, Judah Toro bought property which he later willed to the community to create the institution now known as Toro Infirmary. Incorporated in 1854, the hospital served slave and freemen for fees ranging from $1 to $5 per day. Living in New Orleans was not comparable to life in other major cities east of the Mississippi. Not only was much of the city surrounded by water and sitting on drained swampland, but the heat and humidity were stifling. Added to this formula were frequent subtropical rainstorms, poor drainage, and inadequate sewage systems. Flies and mosquitoes flourished. Epidemics of common diseases such as cholera and yellow fever periodically swept the city and claimed countless lives. Quickly, children lost mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters. Between 1801 and 1851, 51 orphanages were built in the city. In 1854, the city of New Orleans had a population of 150,000 and an estimated Jewish population of 2,000. The great city sat at the crossroads of the eastern and western territories and states that today make up the United States. New Orleans served as a port for southern exports as well as for imports around the world. Charles Duffy noted in his book, The Sword of Pestilence, that publicizing the ravages of the city's epidemics did little to improve the city's image. Rather than sensationalizing or exaggerating the effects of diseases such as yellow fever or cholera, local newspapers tended to underreport the numbers of those stricken or succumbing to disease. It was a common practice for the newspapers and politicians to ignore the early signs of epidemics. Only after the epidemics became out of control did the city leaders react quickly. By then, the losses were staggering. It was against this backdrop that the yellow fever epidemic of 1853 struck the city of New Orleans. An estimated 10% of the city's population is thought to have died. As a percentage of the population, it is believed to be the greatest epidemic and loss of life to strike an American city.